You are standing on a wind-scraped beach in Australia. A small plastic cylinder rolls in the surf at your feet. You pick it up. It is a satellite tag, cracked and crusted with salt, and everything recorded inside it is about to break the rules of the ocean. Because this tag was bolted to a 9-foot great white shark, a predator that fears almost nothing. And the data hidden in its memory says that 4 months after it was attached, that shark was swallowed whole and eaten alive by something we have never identified. That single idea is what pulled me under. A machine survived. It kept recording after the shark was gone. And what it recorded on a specific date in the year 2003 off the southern coast of Australia is stored in a real data set you can still trace today. This is not a campfire legend. This is a temperature reading of 78 degrees Fahrenheit taken from inside the belly of a monster. I remember exactly where I was when this got its hooks in me. It was almost 2 in the morning, and I had a documentary paused on a single frame, a graph of 2 colored lines, and I could not stop staring at the moment one of those lines shot straight up. I sat there whispering to my screen, that's impossible. Sharks don't get eaten. And then I spent the next several years learning that I was wrong. Let me take you down the same path I walked. Because the deeper I went, the less the safe explanation held together, and the more I understood why the people who first saw this data went quiet. It starts with a man named Dave Riggs. He is a filmmaker and a field researcher out of Western Australia, the kind of person who spends more time on a boat than on land. In the year 2003, Riggs was part of a tagging project working with great white sharks, and they caught and tagged a healthy female. She was about 3 meters long, roughly 9 feet, a strong young adult in the prime of her life. Not a pup, not a straggler, a genuine apex predator cruising cold Australian water. They fixed a smart tag to her. If you have never seen one, picture a slim electronic tag about the size of a thick marker pen. Inside it is a tiny computer, a battery, and a set of sensors. It logs depth, it logs water temperature, it logs light levels so scientists can estimate location. It is designed to record for months, then detach on a preset date, float to the surface, and beam its stored memory up to a satellite. That is the whole point. You get a diary of everywhere the animal went and everything it felt, so they let her go. And for months, that little computer did its job in silence, riding on the back of a shark somewhere in the Southern Ocean. Here is where the first strange thing happened. The tag did not wait for its scheduled release date to phone home. It turned up early. It washed ashore on a beach, and it was recovered only about 4 kilometers from the exact spot where the shark had first been tagged. Think about that for a second. This animal could have roamed hundreds or even thousands of miles in 4 months, and yet the tag came back almost to its own starting line. That alone made no sense to me the first time I read it, but it is nothing compared to what was written inside. When Riggs and the team pulled the data off that tag, they got the graph that keeps people like me awake. For months, the numbers are calm and boring, exactly what you would expect. The shark swims in cold water, mostly between 50 and 150 feet down. The temperature, the tag record, sits low, hovering around the cold end, somewhere near 46 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 7.8 degrees Celsius. That is normal. That is a great white living its normal life, and then on one single day, the graph goes insane, the depth line drops off a cliff. In a very short span of time, the tag plunges from the shallows down to roughly 580 meters. That is about 1,900 feet, a violent, high-speed descent into the deep. Sharks do dive, but not like that, not that fast, not that far, not in that pattern. Something yanked this tag downward as if it weighed nothing. But the depth is not the part that made my skin crawl. The part that made me put my coffee down was the temperature line. At the exact same moment as the plunge, the water temperature the tag recorded did not get colder. Down deep, the ocean should get colder, always. Instead, the temperature shot upward. It jumped from that frigid 46 degrees all the way up to about 78 degrees Fahrenheit. In Celsius, that is a leap to roughly 25.9 degrees. I need you to sit with how wrong that is. You are diving toward 1,900 feet into some of the coldest, darkest water on the planet, and your thermometer says you just got warmer than a heated swimming pool, there is only one place in that entire environment that is that warm, inside the body of a large living animal. That tag was no longer measuring the ocean, it was measuring the inside of a stomach, and it stayed warm. This is the detail that closed the door for me. The temperature did not spike and drop back, it held. The tag recorded that elevated body heat warmth for days, drifting up and down through the water in a rhythm that was not the shark's rhythm anymore. It was the rhythm of whatever had eaten her, hunting and diving and surfacing while she sat digesting inside it. Only after that stretch of days did the tag finally get expelled, work its way back to cold water, float to the surface, and wash up on that beach 4 kilometers from home. The 9-foot great white had become a meal. The recorder in her body kept rolling. And that is why we know anything at all. Now here is the moment I want to be honest with you, because I did not swallow this story whole the first time either. My reaction was the same one you are probably having right now. I thought, come on, there has to be a boring answer. A tag glitch, a malfunction, a sensor frying in salt water and spitting out garbage numbers. I wanted that answer. I went looking for it because a broken thermometer is a much more comfortable thing to believe than a predator big enough to inhale a great white shark. So, let me walk you through the ordinary explanations one by one, the exact way I did, and let me show you where each one fell apart in my hands. The first idea is the simplest. The tag broke. A cracked sensor could invent a fake temperature, but a broken sensor does not invent a fake temperature that happens to be the precise warmth of a large animal's core body heat and hold it steady for days, while a completely separate sensor, the depth sensor, simultaneously records a believable, physically consistent diving pattern, 2 independent instruments telling one coherent story of being swallowed, a random malfunction gives you noise, this was not noise, this was a narrative. The second idea I chased was that the shark simply died of natural causes, sank, and the warmth was decomposition. Rotting bodies do generate heat, but a shark that dies and sinks goes down and stays down. It does not rise and fall in a rhythmic diving pattern for days. Dead animals do not dive. And the deep sea is a refrigerator. A carcass at 1900 feet would be pulled toward that cold, not held at a steady 78 degrees. The movement told me this warmth had a heartbeat wrapped around it. The third idea, and the one I clung to longest, was that the shark got tangled in something or wedged in a warm current, some freak oceanographic pocket. But there is no pocket of 1900-foot deep water off southern Australia sitting at pool temperature. The physics does not allow it. The ocean does not build a warm room at the bottom of the cold and cold. And the moment I accepted that, the safe exits were gone. Every reasonable explanation I reached for dissolved, and I was left standing exactly where Dave Riggs was left standing. The tag was inside something alive, and that something was enormous. That is the point where this stopped being a curiosity for me and became an obsession. And honestly, it is also the point where I realized I needed more than a video to hold everything I had found. The full depth of this case, the raw data breakdowns, the reanalysis, and the other deep water cases that follow the same pattern, all of it lives in my book series, First Threshold, Deep Signal, and Hidden Systems, available for $97 at the link in the description over at lostorigins.org. If you are the kind of person who needs to see every number and follow every thread all the way to the end, that is exactly what those books are built for. I wrote them for the people who cannot leave a half-open door alone. But let me bring you back to the data itself, because the question of what ate this shark does not stop at the great white theory, because now I had to ask the only question left. What is big enough, warm enough, and bold enough to eat a healthy 9-foot great white? Riggs went looking for the same answer, and the conclusion he reached is chilling in its simplicity. He proposed that the killer was another great white shark, a much, much larger one. He used a phrase that has haunted the internet ever since. He called it a colossal cannibal great white. Here is why that theory fits the temperature so perfectly, and it is a detail most people never learn Great white sharks are not fully cold-blooded like most fish. They have a special ability called regional endothermy. Using a network of blood vessels that works like a heat exchanger, they trap the warmth their muscles generate and keep parts of their body, including their stomach and gut, significantly warmer than the surrounding sea. A big great white can hold its core meaningfully above the water temperature, so if a giant great white swallowed our tagged shark, the tag would suddenly find itself sitting inside a warm, muscular, insulated gut, reading a temperature far above the freezing dark outside. Somewhere right around the exact number this tag recorded. The math on the predator gets frightening fast. To swallow a 3-meter shark and to generate and hold that much internal heat, the animal doing the eating would have to be substantially larger than its victim. We are talking about a great white potentially over 16 feet long, a genuine giant, the kind of individual most people assume is only exaggeration and old fishermen's tales. And yet, the temperature reading is a fingerprint, and the fingerprint points at exactly that kind of monster. But this is where I have to slow down, because if I only told you the great white theory, I would be doing what the easy videos do. The truth is messier, and the mess is what kept me digging for years. Because here is the thing that never sat right with me. If a colossal great white ate this shark, where is it? Great whites live near the surface, they breach, they are seen, filmed, caught, measured, and tagged constantly in Australian waters. If there were 16 and 17-foot cannibal giants patrolling these coasts, hunting other great whites, why do we so rarely see one? The temperature said great white, but the behavior in that data, the deep, sustained plunge to 1,900 feet, made me wonder if the answer was something that spends its life far below where our eyes ever reach. And that question, that single nagging mismatch between the warmth and the depth, is what finally sent me back to the raw data itself years after everyone else had moved on. Now, I want to be straight with you about something, because you deserve that. The original story, the tag, the graph, the colossal cannibal, all of that made the rounds back when the documentary about this shark first aired. For a while it was everywhere, and then it faded. It became a fun fact, a creepy little anecdote you tell on a boat. And that is exactly the problem that pulled me deeper, because a genuinely staggering piece of evidence, a machine that recorded the inside of an unknown ocean predator, got filed away as entertainment and then forgotten. Nobody went back to the numbers. The original data set sat there quietly, the way a cold case file sits in a basement, complete and waiting, while the world assumed the story was already solved. It was not solved. It was abandoned. And there is a difference between those two words that took me years to feel in my chest. When I realized how little serious re-examination this data ever got, I stopped seeing a fun fact and started seeing a door that was left half open with the lights turned off so nobody would notice what was still inside. So I did the thing the obsessive does. I went back to the depth and temperature record, the actual archived readings, and I ran them through modern analysis tools, the kind of pattern recognition software we simply did not have when this tag first washed ashore in the early 2000s. I wanted to know if the machine had recorded more than anyone realized. I wanted to know if, hidden in the shape of those two lines, there was a signature nobody had bothered to read. And there was. Let me tell you what came out of that reanalysis, because this is the part I have been building toward, and it changed the whole picture for me. When you strip away the assumptions and look purely at the movement, the diving pattern in that data is not random thrashing. It is structured. After the moment of the attack, the tag did not just sink. It began to trace a repeating up and down profile, rising toward the surface and then diving back down toward the deep over and over across those days. That is not the behavior of a dying animal or a tangled corpse. That is the behavior of a large predator actively hunting through the water column, using the deep to travel and the shallows to search. The tag, sitting inside its gut, was drawing a map of that predator's daily life. But here is the detail that made me sit back in my chair. When you line up the temperature against that diving rhythm, the warmth barely wavers. Through every deep plunge to the cold and every rise to the surface, the internal temperature the tag recorded stayed remarkably stable. That stability is the whole key. It means the animal was not just briefly warm, it was thermally massive. It had so much body, so much muscle and insulation that diving into freezing deep water for hours at a time barely touched its core. Small animals lose heat fast. Only something with enormous size and powerful heat retention holds steady like that. And that, precisely that, is what pointed me back toward the great white. After all, but a great white far outside the range of what we comfortably admit exists? Because the thermal stability in that reanalyzed profile does not describe an ordinary big shark. It describes an animal whose body is large enough and warm enough to treat a 1,900-foot dive into the cold as barely an inconvenience. The data is not just saying a large predator ate this shark. The data is describing the size of the furnace inside that predator, and that furnace is monstrous. Here is the piece that I consider the buried treasure of this entire case, the thing that ties the loose end I could never let go of. Remember my problem. Temperature said warm-blooded giant like a great white, but the deep, sustained diving looked wrong for a surface hunter. The reanalysis of the movement pattern resolves it. The rhythm in that data, deep travel punctuated by rises, is exactly the profile of a very large great white in a mode we almost never observe because we almost never track them there. Big mature great whites are known to make deep offshore dives, plunging hundreds of meters, moving through the dark in ways that keep them completely out of sight of every beach, every cage, every camera. We see the small ones near the surface. The true giants may spend enormous stretches of their lives in the exact zone this tag was dragged into, which means the reason nobody has caught the colossal cannibal is not that it does not exist. It is that it lives where we are not looking. The tag did not just record a killing. It recorded the hunting grounds of a class of predator we have essentially never studied, because it operates below the layer of ocean we pay attention to. The victim's own body turned into a recording device, sent back a signal from a world we pretend is empty, and I want to be careful and fair with you because I promised I would be. Not every scientist agrees the eater was a great white. Some have suggested it could have been another kind of large predator entirely. That debate is real and it is honest. But every serious version of this story agrees on the two facts that matter most, the two facts locked into that little cracked cylinder. Whatever ate this shark was large enough to swallow a 9-foot great white and warm enough to hold a stomach at pool temperature through days of deep diving. Those two facts alone rewrite what you thought you knew about who sits at the top of the ocean. Our tagged great white, an apex predator that we imagine has no natural enemy, was just prey. Something eats the thing that eats everything. The reason this hit me so hard, and the reason I think it will stay with you now that you know it, is what it says about how little of the ocean we have actually met. We tag a shark to learn about the shark. Instead, the shark's tag became an accidental spy sent into the belly of a creature we cannot name and have almost never seen. Every reading on that graph is a message smuggled out of a place we do not have access to, written by an animal that had no idea it was writing anything at all. I spent a long time wanting the boring answer. A glitch, a dead sensor, a shark that just sank. I wanted any explanation that would let me close the tab and go to sleep, but the machine would not let me. Two independent sensors telling one impossible, consistent story, a depth line that plunges, a temperature line that climbs into the warmth of living flesh and refuses to come down, and a movement pattern hidden in the noise until modern tools pulled it into the light that maps the daily hunt of a giant hiding in water we never watch. That is what I finally understood, standing in the middle of this case with all the safe exits closed behind me. The scariest thing in the ocean is not the great white shark. The scariest thing is whatever is big enough and patient enough and deep enough to eat one and leave nothing behind but a tag on a beach and a temperature reading that should not exist. Here is the feeling I was left holding, and it is the one I want to hand to you now. We told ourselves the great white was the final answer, the top of the food chain, the last word. And a single recovered tag, 4 kilometers from where it started, quietly proved that the top of the chain has something above it that we have never looked in the eye. If you are the kind of person who hears the official answer and feels that quiet itch that says, wait, that doesn't actually add up, then you already know why I could not walk away from this one. You do not accept the tidy version. Neither do I. That is the whole reason we found each other. So I want to hear from you. Look at that temperature reading. 78 degrees Fahrenheit, held steady for days at the bottom of the cold. In your gut, what do you believe swallowed that shark? A colossal cannibal great white bigger than anything we admit exists? Or something down in the deep that we have not named yet? Tell me in the comments. And tell me where in the world you are watching from, because I read them. And the best theories on this channel always come from you. If a machine surviving inside a monster and sending back its secrets is the kind of mystery you refuse to leave unsolved, then stay with me, because you belong with the people who keep chasing the cases everyone else quietly closed. There is another one. I am already deep inside a set of deep water recordings from a trench where the sensors picked up something moving that was far too large to be anything we have on record. And the moment I show you those numbers, you are going to feel exactly the way I felt at 2 in the morning with a paused graph glowing on my screen. Do not let me chase it alone. Before I go, I want to leave you with the one thought that I keep circling back to. The thing I could not shake no matter how many times I reread that data. We named this shark a victim, but we never named her killer. 4 months of her life, logged in, silence, and then a single day that rewrote everything. And the part that still gives me chills is how close we came to never knowing at all. If that tag had released on schedule, if it had drifted a few kilometers the other way, if the surf had carried it out instead of in, this story would not exist. There would be no graph, no temperature spike, no proof, just a shark that vanished the way thousands of them vanish every year, quietly into a dark we choose not to examine. That is what haunts me most. Not the monster in the deep, but the idea of how many other messages the ocean has tried to send us and lost in the surf. How many recorders sit right now on the seafloor, holding proof of things we insist are not there? This one tag made it back. One out of who knows how many, and it carried a single, undeniable sentence written in numbers, a sentence that says the great white is not the end of the story. Something down there is still writing the next line, and it has not signed its name. I'll be honest, this is where it gets deep and where I have to stop the video, but it isn't the end. Inside the Unexplained Society, I take you through the full reanalysis, dive by dive, ask me your own questions, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You're not doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code, cancel anytime, one click, come join me. If a great white can be swallowed whole, imagine what's happening in Florida right now. There's a new predator taking down giant pythons, and the footage will stay with you. It's starting right here.